Hello BookTube, Books with Banks back again with a bit of a fun one today. So as some of you might know, I've been getting into Diana Gabaldon's Outlander series, a great historical fiction slash time travel romance. I'm loving the book so far, and I love the show as well. I have a couple other videos on my channel in which I talk about these books in particular, if you're interested in those. Anyway, today I'm going to look at something a little different. I'm going to go through a scene and try and analyze what works about it. The only thing though, it's a sex scene, and I think it would be interesting to see people's reactions to a sex scene reading versus, say, any of the battle scene readings. You'd think the former would be the more palatable because it's all about love and intimacy, but I highly suspect this scene analysis might make more people uncomfortable than any of the violent scenes that I've already analyzed on my channel from other works of fantasy such as Malazan. Anyway, while this scene is from Book 3, Voyager, I'll say definitely no spoilers beyond the halfway point of Voyager, or beyond, like, right there. But also only really light spoilers, like the fact that these characters I'm talking about are together at this point in time is sort of a spoiler, and the fact that this takes place on a ship that's crossing the Atlantic could also be considered maybe a spoiler. Though, notice I've been vague with names up to this point, but here's your official spoiler warning if you think finding out any of those details might ruin the books for you. Alright, so we're on pages 694 to 696 in the Bantam Dell mass market paperback of Book 3, Voyager. So we're with Jamie and Claire now, the main couple and the main characters of the series. It is 1767 or something like that, 68, and they're aboard a ship heading for the West Indies to try to find and bring home a family member. Jamie has just jumped in the water to save a friend from sharks, though there's quite a bit more going on in the chaos like that precedes this scene, but that's the essential gist of it. Jamie was heroic and now his clothes are all wet. Jamie and Claire have reunited in this book after several years apart, but now because of how the sleeping arrangements have to work on the ship they're on, the two of them can't really be intimate with each other. They can't sleep in the same cabin. Again, there's more details that explain that situation, but basically everyone above decks is busy with the sharks and whatnot. Jamie's just been heroic. These two lovebirds haven't been able to touch each other in weeks, so here we go. He had spoken jokingly, but as soon as the words were out of his mouth, his face went blank. He glanced quickly to port, where the crew was arguing and jostling over the remains of the shark, while Fergus and Marcelly cautiously examined the severed head, lying engate-jawed on the deck. Then his eyes met mine, with a perfect understanding. 30 seconds later, we were below in his cabin. Cold drops from his wet hair rained over my shoulders and slid down my bosom, but his mouth was hot and urgent. The hard curves of his back glowed warm through the soaked fabric of the shirt that stuck to them. "Ifrin," he said breathlessly, breaking loose long enough to yank at his breeches. "Christ, they're stuck to me. I cannot get them off." Snorting with laughter, he jerked at the laces, but the water had soaked them into a hopeless knot. First break, just to talk about Gabaldon's sense of humor and how she's great at inserting this really familiar sense of humor in a love scene. I think that makes it immediately more relatable and familiar to us, and it gets us, the readers, probably just as impatient as the two about to get it on. I also love how we go from this description, quote, like cold drops from his wet hair rained over my shoulders and slid down my bosom, but his mouth was hot and urgent. We go from that to, which is a fairly serious and passionate description, sure, but then moments later, this like very human and hilarious description. Snorting with laughter, he jerked at the laces, but the water had soaked them into a hopeless knot. Moving on to some more comedy with a knife. "A knife," I said. "Where's a knife?" Snorting myself at the sight of him, struggling frantically to get his drenched shirt tail out of his breeches, I began to rummage through the drawers of the desk, tossing out bits of paper, bottle of ink, a snuff box, everything but a knife. The closest thing was an ivory letter opener, made in the shape of a hand with a pointing finger. I seized upon this and grasped him by the waistband, trying to saw at the tangled laces. He yelped in alarm and backed away. "Christ, be careful with that, Sassenach. It's no going to do you any good to get my breeks off, and you gelled me in the process." Half crazed with lust as we were, that seemed funny enough to double us both up laughing. So again, just more great comedy with the knife. It's hilarious, but also sort of like a weird kind of tension building that I think is important for getting us invested in these romance scenes that proper level of sexual tension. All right, moving on. Here, rummaging in the chaos of his birth, he snatched up his dirk and brandished it triumphantly. An instant later, the laces were severed and the sopping brakes lay puddled on the floor. He seized me, picked me up bodily, and laid me on the desk, heedless of crumpled papers and scattered quills, tossing my skirts up past my waist. He grabbed my hips and half lay on me, his hard thighs forcing my legs apart. It was like grasping a salamander, a blaze of heat in a chilly shroud. I gasped as the tail of his sopping shirt touched my bare belly, then gasped again as I heard footsteps in the passage. Second break here, or third break here. Gabaldon never ceases to amaze me with her creative similes and like euphemisms, especially in these scenes. They kind of make me laugh, but they're also a little bit relatable. Like what she just said there, it was like grasping a salamander. Like, oh, whoa, like that's just a very striking. I don't know if wordplay is the right term, but that's very striking figurative language. Here we really get into the few spicy details, the lust, the passion of the scene. Moving on. "Stop," I hissed in his ear. "Someone's coming." "Too late," he said, with breathless certainty. "I must have you or die." He took me with one quick, ruthless thrust, and I bit his shoulder hard, tasting salt and wet linen, but he made no sound. 2 strokes, 3, and I had my legs locked tight around his buttocks, my cry muffled in his shirt, not caring either who else might be coming. He had me, quickly and thoroughly, and thrust himself home and home again, with a deep sound of triumph in his throat, shuddering and shaking in my arms. 2 minutes later, the cabin door swung open. Innes looked slowly round the wreckage of the room. His soft brown gaze traveled from the ravaged desk to me, sitting damp and disheveled, but respectably clothed, upon the berth, and rested at last on Jamie, who sat collapsed on a stool, still clad in his wet shirt, chest heaving and the deep red color fading slowly from his face. Innes's nostrils flared delicately, but he said nothing. He walked into the cabin, nodding at me, and bent to reach under Fergus's berth, whence he pulled out a bottle of brandy wine. "For the Jinny," he said to me, so as he mightn't take a chill. He turned toward the door and paused, squinting thoughtfully at Jamie. "You might should have Mr. Murphy make you some broth on that same account, McDoo. They do say as 'tis dangerous to get chilled after hard work, aye. You didn't want to take the egg. Sorry. There was a faint twinkle in the mournful brown depths. Jamie brushed back the salty tangle of his hair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Aye, well, and if it should come to that, Innes, at least I shall die a happy man." There you go. There you have it. A short but sweet sex scene in Diana Gabaldon's Voyager. Now, is it my favorite love scene? No, probably not even my favorite from this book alone. But I did just read it the other day, and it made me, or it kind of inspired me to make a video talking about it. I think what Gabaldon does so well and what makes her sex scenes so believable and compelling is how relatable the lovers are in their sort of stumbling awkwardness, their sarcasm with each other, their winking understanding of one another. Sex can be awkward, funny, fiery, desperate, etc. It can be all of these things, and Gabaldon is able to convey all of this while at the same time making us finally kind of sigh with relief that our Clara and Jamie, our favorites, have been able to finally have sex again. All in all, a great scene. And if you're on the fence about reading this series or not, and you wanted to know exactly how like sexy the sex scenes got, or how steamy they got, hopefully that gave you a little bit of a taste. Anyway, thank you as always so much for watching. If you're subscribed, expect to be notified pretty soon here for when my review of this book drops. Thank you again. Have a good one. Bye.